let's start with the biggest news, the Brittney Griner news.
Okay.
Does Biden look weak? Yes. To the average American who's just going to read the headline, yes. Black lesbian basketball player who, marched with Black Lives Matter. So of course, Republicans and evangelical conservatives are saying she hates America. We traded an arms dealer for someone who hates America. That's what Trump put out on Parler and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's peel back the onion a bit. All right.
Yeah.
Viktor Bout, yes, he is an arms dealer. He's Putin's friend. That's why they've been trying to get him out of jail. The Russians have been trying to get him out of jail for years. All right. They took Brittney Griner captive because they wanted leverage to get Viktor Bout out of jail. They've been trying this for years. It never worked because they never had the leverage of having an American celebrity. So while the conservatives will say, oh, she gets privileged because she's Black, because she's a lesbian, because she's this, she's that, it's actually a celebrity privilege, because you notice none of these celebrities said a doggone thing about the other Americans that are in Russian prisons. Like Paul Whelan. None of them said anything. But the moment they took a celebrity, LeBron James, Zac Efron, everybody from Justin Bieber to Oprah is saying something about we got to get Brittney Griner out of jail. All right. Now back to Viktor Bout. We can still keep tabs on this guy. Do you really think he's going to go back to trying to sell arms? He's in his 50s. Yes, the Nicolas Cage movie, The Lord of War, was made about him. But do we really think he's going to go back to trying to sell arms? Do we really think he's going to be a danger to us? Yes, it would be nice for him to serve out his entire prison sentence. He is getting off easy because he's Putin's friend and the entire Russian government was mobilized to try to get him out of jail. But in terms of if we're talking about the idea of him being a threat, I doubt it. And we still have drones and stuff. If we really need to take him out, the moment he steps out of Russia, we can do that. All right. Now, let's move on to the headline of, oh, we left a Marine, because that's what people are weighing in on. That's what people are upset about. Biden looks weak. We gave up an arms dealer and we left a Marine and we brought back the Black lesbian who hates America.
A little background, by the way. Little background on the former U.S. Marine. His name is Paul Whelan. He was detained in Moscow in 2018. He was detained there on espionage charges and actually found guilty of them in a closed trial, and has been serving almost 4 years of a 16-year prison sentence. But President Biden has vowed to work on getting him home too. What say you?
Thank you for pointing out he's been there for 4 years. What does that mean? That means he was there for 2 years under Trump and Trump didn't get him out. All right. Thank you for pointing out he's there on espionage charges. Now, it doesn't surprise me that he's found guilty of those espionage charges because it's a kangaroo court over there. So that doesn't, the guilty verdict doesn't matter to me. I don't believe he's actually there for espionage. Who knows if there was legitimate espionage happening? But the Russians feel like they need more because they feel like they have an actual American spy, whereas Brittney Griner was just an American who had cannabis oil in her bag. All right. So it's understandable from the Russian perspective why they would want more, or why they wouldn't be willing to give this guy up at all. Also, let's be honest, this whole thing was done to try to sow division in America. This whole thing was done to try to make Biden look weak. This whole thing was done to try to give the Russians leverage to maybe get us to stop supporting Ukraine and maybe get some sanctions relief. All right. And so by giving us back our Black lesbian basketball player, but keeping the Marine, it makes for a headline that is very divisive. They took Brittney Griner captive to try to make Biden look bad and to sow culture war divisiveness. And they gave back Brittney Griner while keeping the Marine because that helps them with their overall goal of embarrassing Biden and sowing more division. So the people that are upset, frankly, they're reacting the exact way Vladimir Putin wanted them to. Do you agree with that reading?
I can't say that I disagree. Again, it was a calculated move to grab Brittney Griner. She did have a prescription, by the way, for her cannabis oils, and she did take ownership of of having the cannabis oils on her. She didn't try to deflect or anything like that. However, to your point, I do think it was a calculated and political move to take her. The Democratic Party, part of their strength lies in Black women voting for them. So they knew that it was going to be very difficult for them to win another election going forward without doing something for the Black community, specifically African-American women. And on the heels of the Raphael Warnock win in Georgia, it's important that the Democrats maintain the slight leverage that they appear to have over the Republicans on the heels of the non-red wave that did not occur during the midterm elections. Everything is calculated. Nothing is ever done out of the goodness of anybody's heart. And to your point, not only has this military gentleman, Whelan, been serving part of his sentence already, he was also dishonorably discharged. So we have to keep in mind, when the United States gets involved in hostage or exchange situations, they have to make a calculated move on how it benefits them, and both sides do. And while we don't know everything that was at stake here, I do think Brittney Griner should have been brought home. It sounds like we need to learn more about what brought Whelan to his conviction in Russia, albeit from my understanding, it was a closed court, so we don't have much information on what that court case is about. Mm-hmm. And nonetheless, the Democratic Party and Biden administration have to make a calculated decision on who's worth the fight to bring home and how that impacts relationships with any country and the autonomy other countries have with regard to the rules within their country.
Yeah.
This is why you got to be careful when you go to other countries. You can't just be bringing shit. You can't just be bringing like weed and coke and this and that, because in some countries, drugs are punishable by life in prison and or death.
Yes. Yeah.
So know your international laws before you start trying to, go girls gone wild in a country that you're not sure what the laws are.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also should point out, we might be stating the obvious to some, but based on what the Biden administration put out, they said this was the only trade that could be made. They never actually entered into any negotiations for Paul Whelan. When I say they, the Russians. The Russians never responded to anything that the Biden administration said about getting Paul Whelan out. They offered Viktor Bout in exchange for Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan, and the Russians said no, and they only were willing to talk about Brittney Griner. So the Biden administration made the only trade that was available.
Why do you think the power lied in Russia to make that decision? How come do you think that the Biden administration didn't hold out for both of them?
Why would they do that? That's the question. Were they supposed to let
not bring her home,
continue to rot in a Russian labor camp in Siberia because they couldn't get a better trade that would make them look better?
Right.
That's the type of thing I would expect Donald Trump to do. He wants the best PR. He wants the best headline. He wants the thing that will help his approval ratings more than doing the right thing and bringing someone home.
Right.
Were we supposed to hold out? And back to your point about Black women are the base of the Democratic voting bloc. So it would look horrible if word got out that Brittney Griner was offered and the Biden administration held out because they wanted something, a better deal.
But because the public is so uninformed on the context of the entire conversation with regard to bringing Brittney Griner home, as well as the context of what brought Mr. Whelan to his espionage charges and conviction in Russia, the reactionary response, of course, is to say, how could we leave a veteran there? Having said that, I don't think it's a good look. It's not a good look. And knowing that the average person in the public is not seasoned in understanding the dynamics of something like this, I don't think this is the good look on the heels of an election cycle in the next 2 years.
Well, there was no other good look. It's not a good look to hold out and wait and let them rot in prison. And it's also not a good look to bring one back and leave the other. However, the Biden administration did do their due diligence. They did do right by Paul Whelan's family. They told Paul Whelan's family ahead of time that this was happening. And Paul Whelan's family did go on national TV and say, we are okay with this.
Okay, I didn't know that.
They were able to bring at least one person home.
I didn't know that. Okay.
But no good deed goes unpunished. Regardless, it was going to look bad. And that was the point from the beginning.
When did the family speak on this? When did Whelan's family speak
on this?
The day of.
The day they announced Brittney Griner coming out, they also put out the statement from Paul Whelan's family, and Paul Whelan's family went on they did multiple news hits that day.
Interesting. I didn't know that, and I don't think the public knows that. Can we pull up when that occurred? I'd like to see that. Let's see. Whelan family speaks out. Speaks on Griner exchange. You're right. 2 days ago, Paul Whelan's family speaks after Griner prisoner swap. And according to this, I am looking at KTL Online News.
Right. Yeah, it's on the Today Show. And that's one of the major networks versions of Good Morning America.
Okay, what did they say? I'm scrolling through.
Yeah, they said they made the right choice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, David Whelan said, that's unfortunate for Paul and for the wrongful detainees, but I think it's great news if Miss Griner can bring her name and her energy to making sure the U.S. government is proactive and being more assertive to resolve these cases quickly, like they did in her case. As the Whelan family continues to wait, it's his brother's kindness David Whelan said his family misses the most. Okay.
Yeah. Which is why
it sounds like they understand the decision. I mean, they don't sound resentful.
Yes. Now, okay, so let's talk about what they said, though. They said, hey, we're hoping Brittney Griner can come back and speak out more about people that are taken captive and speak out more on Paul's behalf, because there were no celebrities talking about Paul Whelan, and there were none of these conservative media people talking about Paul Whelan until Brittney Griner.
Until her.
Okay. Right. So hopefully Brittney Griner, the moment she gets back, can maybe not the moment she gets back, but hopefully Brittney Griner can use her platform to speak out for Paul Whelan. Now, if she comes back and she never says a word about Paul Whelan ever again, then that's going to be kind of messed up. And the Whelan family would be justified in saying, hey, wait a second.
Right. Oh, and to your point, I'm also looking at the national news. They have quoted, again, David Whelan, I think President Joe Biden made the right decision. His job is to protect all Americans, and it would have been wrong for him to leave behind an American when he had the ability to bring them home. Okay. Fair enough.
But
and also 2 days ago,
want to make their point regardless of what the Whelan family said, because they're not going to let a chance go by where they cannot seize upon it for culture war BS.
Right, that's true. Well, one senior administration official said the choice was bringing Griner home right now or bringing no one home right now, and so they were able to bring her home, and they took it.
Yes. And I do also want to point out, I feel bad pointing out that Paul Whelan was dishonorably discharged. I don't like digging into someone's past. I don't necessarily believe his being dishonorably discharged has anything to do with whatever was going on in Russia.
Right.
I'm only saying that because conservatives and people on the far right are acting like this guy's a war hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it says Putin was not willing to budge on the Paul Whelan case.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's counterintelligence, and Putin has a background with the KGB. So he's going to take that kind of stuff personally. That's like an infiltration into his intelligence system. He's not going to budge on that. He's like, you can take your basketball player. This motherfucker right here is staying.
Yeah. As far as the Russians are concerned, he's a spy, regardless if he was or not. So
yes. So it's a different situation. It's apples and oranges. Although it's a bad look, you have to dig a little bit deeper to get a little context on the situation.
But the headline and the reaction to the headline is exactly what Putin wanted.
Yes. In a phone call with CNN on Thursday, Whelan voiced his frustration that more has not been done to secure his release. He was quoted as saying, I was arrested for a crime that never occurred, and I don't understand why I'm still sitting here. Paul Whelan's sister, Elizabeth Whelan, spoke with Biden on Thursday afternoon and described it as a good call. And we will leave that situation at that.